Hello everyone, my name is Mike and... here we are. Hello everyone, my name is Mike and this is the Bored Cyborg. Welcome back to another episode of What I've Watched, which is essentially a weekly video journal that catalogs what I watched in the previous week, film-wise, TV show-wise, anything like that, and I kind of go through them one by one, discuss them a bit, and give my opinions on them, and recommend them if I could. So let's get right to it with the first film that I checked out, and it was a good one. Batman: The Dark Knight Returns Part 1. This is part of a 2-film series that is based on the Frank Miller comics, I believe from the 80s. I don't know much about the comics. In fact, I don't read many comics myself, but I do enjoy superhero films on occasion, especially Batman. I gravitate towards Batman a lot, and there are plenty of Batman movies. This is one of the best that I've seen. I think it's damn near perfect. It's gritty. It features an old Bruce Wayne, a waning Bruce Wayne, who is probably in his late 50s, early 60s, and he's tired. He's been retired for, I think it's about a decade or so, and so crime has risen. And this gang, I forget the name of the gang, but this gang essentially takes over the city. They're running rampant. Nobody can keep them in check. And so Batman is forced out of retirement to do something about them. His awesome sidekick, I fucking love Robin in this film. One of my favorite Robins in a Batman film, if not my favorite. And it's the first female Robin that I've seen in a Batman film or a TV show or anything like that. Her name is Carrie Kelly, and it's basically her origin story of how she looks up to Batman, and she essentially dons the costume and starts jumping around the city and pretty much f***ing up at first, which is great. It reminded me of Spider-Man in a way, where Spider-Man, when he first gets his powers, doesn't know how to use them, and he's all uncalibrated, and he can't quite get his bearings. It's sort of like that with Carrie Kelly's Robin. She screws up a couple attempted rescues, but she eventually gets it, and by the end of the film, she really helps Bruce out. In fact, well, no spoilers. I'll leave it at that. I'm excited to watch the second film in the series because the first one honestly blew me away. And it's directed by Jay Oliva, who did a few other Justice League movies, animated movies in the series, including the second one of this. Awesome movie, one of the best Batman movies I've ever seen, and I've seen a bunch of them. Definitely check it out if you like things like Mask of Phantasm, and if you just like Batman and want to see a different spin on it. And there's a great spoiler stinger at the very end, the last scene, which I did not see coming, and it makes me even much more excited for the sequel. So, Dark Knight Returns Part 1. Yeah. The next thing I watched was a rewatch of one of my favorite anime directors, Yoshiaki Kawajiri. He directed Cyber City 080-808 in 1990. It's more so known as Cyber City 080. It takes place in the future, I think 2400, something like that, 25th century. It features 3 different characters who are criminals, essentially, and they're controlled by the government in order to have them do their dirty work, essentially. So what happens is, let's just say Son Goku, this character right here, he has 300 years in his sentence, and each crime he does, each bad guy he takes down, it deducts from his sentence. So that's the idea of the film. Each of these characters gets their own little 40 to 50 minute short story. And all of them are fantastic. I especially I can't really pick one. They're all great. And each, show each character and how different and how similar they are in a lot of ways. And all the characters are fantastic. The animation is wonderful. It's violent. It's brutal. It's gritty. Early 90s, late, 80s anime that I absolutely love. And again, Yoshiaki Kawajiri directed all 3 of these. Yoshiaki Kawajiri is one of my favorite anime directors. He did a lot of work in the 80s and 90s, and he's still working now. He did things like Wicked City in the 80s, which I'm not a huge fan of. I can't really get down with the tentacle sex. Not sure why. Most famously, I think he's known for Ninja Scroll, which is phenomenal. Blew me away when I was a kid. One of the first animes I ever watched. Still love it to this day. He did the X TV series, Demon City Shinjuku, the Highlander Search for Vengeance movie, Goku Midnight Eye. He's just one of my favorite anime directors. Every film he does, I think, is wonderful. And I just think he's a wonderful and underrated anime director that really people should check out more of his work because, Ninja Scroll is fantastic, but it's not the only thing he did. He did many other great anime from the 80s and 90s. So check out Cyber City 080-808. God, I love that. Cyber City 080. The final collection here is the way to get it on DVD. It is out of print, but it's pretty cheap. So check it out. Cyberpunk anime amazingness. The next thing, I've been watching a lot of anime. So the next thing I've been watching, I'm about 15 episodes in, and it's my first time through, is Fist of the North Star, also known as Hokuto no Ken in Japan. So what led me to getting into this film, I've owned it for quite some time, and obviously the subject matter interests me. You know, it's sort of a Mad Max, Bruce Lee kind of mashup. But I've been playing the Sega Genesis quite a bit, which is a console I grew up with, and one of the games I'm very fond of that I remember playing very early in the 90s, maybe even the late 80s, was Last Battle. Now, Last Battle I did not know until much later in my life was based on a Japanese anime, nor did I really care. It was just a video game that I enjoyed playing. But Last Battle for the Genesis is essentially Hokuto no Ken. When they brought it over here, they took out all the blood and gore, which is awesome in the Japanese version. Of course, they dumbed it down, pussied it down for America. So that led me into getting into the series. I was like, you know what? Now is the time to get into this series. I own 33, 34 episodes of the first series, volume 1 through 5, and I own the movie. So, and I hear the movie is just an amalgam of, you know, the story arc of the first 35 episodes or so. So, what can I say about Hokuto no Ken, Fist of the North Star? It's fucking amazing. It is so over the top and brutal. You know how Bruce Lee used to what the fuck? In this, he takes it to a whole nother level. He's like, what the fuck? And he's basically hitting these pressure points on these enemies, and nothing happens at first for like 10-15 seconds, sometimes longer. Each tactic takes a little longer to kill the person. But essentially, he hits all these pressure points, and then the bad guy's like, oh, that didn't hurt at all. It felt like a mosquito bite. And they start laughing, and Ken just stands there, and he's like, you're gonna die in about 10 seconds. And they're like, yeah, right, you idiot. And then a timer pops up on the fucking screen, and it shows the 10-second countdown. And sure enough, as it draws closer to 0, they start to become paralyzed, and they start going, what's going on? And they explode. Into obscured gore. It's not quite gore. It's very stylized, but it is so awesome and funny. And interestingly enough, some of the bad guys you really feel pity for, and you feel for them as the countdown is going, when you know they're gonna die. You know, because obviously a lot of them are begging for their life. Some of them try to fight it. A lot of them end up cowering and begging for their life to Ken, and Ken's like, too late, you should have thought about this earlier. You're fucking dead. And then they explode into a million pieces after weeping to Ken. And it's just glorious. It's there is a very cool story arc, but it really is like a video game. One level after the other, defeating the bad guys, then getting to the boss and figuring out a way to defeat him. And somehow, regardless of how powerful Ken is, somehow there are some interactions with villains where you feel like Ken may not win. And it's really well done in that way. It keeps you guessing, keeps you on your toes. And it's just a great show, great series from the mid-80s. I think it started in 84, based on a manga. Excellent stuff. Toyo Ashida directs this and created it, I believe. It's just wonderful. I also want to check out the film, you know, once I get through the first 35 episodes or so. So yeah, Fist of the North Star is awesome. And if you haven't played Last Battle, check it out. It's very early Sega Genesis, came out near launch, if not launch. And but it's a very, I guess, very nostalgic. It's not a great game, but it's nostalgic and it's hard as a motherfucker. So check out Fist of the North Star. Next on the list is Gary Daniels in the '95 American live-action adaptation of Fist of the North Star. That's right, Gary Daniels as Ken, and I can't fucking wait. Hokuto no Ken, Fist of the North Star. Love this shit. The other anime TV series that I've been watching is a 39-episode run of a 1990 anime called Nadia, The Secret of the Blue Water. This is Hideaki Anno's first directorial project, Nadia and the Secret of the Blue Water. He obviously went on to do Neon Genesis Evangelion and a ton of other things. He also did some animation in Nausicaa before he started directing his own work. And I haven't seen Neon Genesis, but I felt the need to start with his first project, and it's something that really honestly interests me a lot more. It's based on the Jules Verne novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and it follows Nadia, who's a character. She's not sure where she's from, but she believes she's from Africa, and it follows her and a young French inventor boy, kind of a kid genius. Nadia has a pendant, the pendant of blue water, on a necklace, and essentially a bunch of people are after it. I'm not going to go too deep into the story because it gets really cool with Atlantis and Neo-Atlantis and things like that, but you basically have this Team Rocket-esque trio of bumbling characters who are essentially thieves, I think, and they're trying to get the blue water from Nadia. So you have that, you have Nadia and the French boy trying to evade them, and the French kid has all these inventions that work for a little while. He's really messing around with aviation. The film takes place late 19th century, and he's trying to perfect that. And then they come into a run-in on this island that the people on the island are being controlled by this mysterious group who wear hoods, and they're called the Neo-Atlanteans. And that's really all I'm going to say, but it's an awesome story so far. I'm about 10 episodes in, and we just met Captain Nemo and the Nautilus. Well, we met him earlier on the series, but he came back in a big way in like the 9th episode. And it's just a really great anime series. It's so colorful, it's so vibrant, the characters are great. I am watching it in Japanese with English subtitles. It's funny, it's adventurous, the music is wonderful, and again, it has a very distinct, bright, and vivacious look to the colorization and the line work, and it's just phenomenal. I knew I was going to love it, and I can't afford the Blu-ray right now. It's about 70 bucks, so I acquired it. So that's why I don't have it displayed here, is because I'm watching it. By other means, Nadia and the Secret of the Blue Water. Check it out, 1990, fantastic anime series. I'm loving it. Can't wait to get through the rest of it. Alright, so aside from the anime, I did watch a live-action film, and it was one that I kind of went into pretty blindly. It was on Netflix. It's called Other Life. And Other Life is an Australian, low-budget science fiction thriller that follows a young woman who is a co-owner of this futuristic company that essentially sells, it's not quite a drug, it's like an eye drop that you drop in your eye, and it sends you on this experience, this first-person experience. It essentially implants a memory in your head, and it makes it feel real, like you're actually experiencing it. Now, if this sounds familiar to you, it did to me, because it reminded me of a lot of the 1980 science fiction film, underrated science fiction film with Chris Walken and Natalie Wood and Louise Fletcher called Brainstorm. It was a very similar concept. It's a great movie. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. Brainstorm is essentially about this inventor who creates this machine that you put on your head, and you can experience things that you may not ever get to experience, like skydiving or skiing or a roller coaster, I remember in the scene. And the film does a really cool effect when it goes into that mode, like it kind of snow globes it or fish eyes it, and it's really cool. Now, Other Life doesn't quite do any of that, those kind of tricks or anything, but it is this essentially the same idea. The woman like I said, she's a co-owner, so the other guy is more of the business type. She's the nerd, the creator, you know, the genius. And this other guy is more the business end of it. And he wants to use this substance, drug, I guess you can call it. They don't refer to it as a drug, but this substance to imprison people. They figure out a way to make it seem like they're living, you know, out a sentence of a year, 365 days, but essentially it's only a minute of time. So things don't go so well, and the young woman gets entangled in a whole bunch of conspiracy shit, and it gets really good. I was pretty into this film. I think the third act, it sort of falters, and it feels like it should have ended a few times before it actually does. But with that said, it's an underrated little sci-fi film from Australia that came out in 2017. I recommend it. If you like sci-fi and you don't want to see the run-of-the-mill shit that is being regurgitated nowadays, this is a little different. Even though it does borrow heavily from Brainstorm, there's no doubt in my mind that the director and writer saw it, but, you know, it does become its own thing. The second act is actually phenomenal. It's very engrossing and keeps you engaged, and I actually ended up really liking it. So check it out. No actors that I knew, since it is low budget and it's from Australia, but Australian sci-fi from a couple years ago. So check out Other Life on Netflix. Aside from that one live action film, the anime, and the animated film that I watched, I also watch a lot of nature documentaries. I've talked about Planet Earth before, I believe, and Blue Planet. I love David Attenborough. I love his books. I love his work, all of his naturalist work. I think it's phenomenal, especially, obviously the stuff that he does with BBC. He is the greatest naturalist of our century, of this time. So I popped in one that I hadn't seen, and that's Africa. And this is essentially more Planet Earth. I didn't know it was so similar to Planet Earth, and I was pleasantly surprised. This is just a whole bunch of episodes focusing on different areas in Africa. I've watched the Congo, which are the lungs of Africa, and essentially most likely where we began, humans, and it was just as interesting as the Amazon episode that was in Planet Earth 2. And so I watched that one. I watched the Kalahari Desert. Africa is so diverse in its ecosystems, and that's what really keeps this interesting. And, well, it's interesting nonetheless. It's heartbreaking, it's beautiful, it's terrifying, it's tragic, it's wonderful, it's all of those things, and it's our planet. I love Planet Earth, love BBC Earth, and I love Africa so far. I'm a few episodes in, so check it out. The elephant segment just killed me. This is wonderful. I also chipped away a couple more episodes of Blue Planet 2. I like to savor these series, so I usually stretch it out over a long period of time. But I couldn't help it. I watched 2 in a row. One was The Big Blue, which was an amazing change of course for the series because we've been following along the coasts and the deep, and this one just took place in, what the majority of our planet's water is, just wide open. I compare it, it's analogous to a desert, essentially, just a desert of water. The creatures that thrive just in the middle of the oceans are some of the most fascinating and some of the ones that are most similar to us, a lot of mammals. The first thing that Attenborough says, it's, the Wild West or something along those lines of the ocean, and it truly set the tone for me. These characters' plights to survive and to live in such a barren wasteland of water, essentially a wasteland, it's fascinating, and it just reminded me of post-apocalypse, but with water in a weird way. I absolutely love that episode. The next episode I watched was going back to the coasts, and that was the coral reefs. And oh my god, this might be my favorite episode so far. All of them are my favorite. The Deep is awesome. Big Blue was fucking beautiful. Coral reefs. This episode blew me away. The colors alone will keep you engaged. It's visually stunning. The way that the coral reproduce, I had no idea how coral reproduced. I'm learning about all this stuff constantly, but I didn't know how coral reproduced. And essentially climate change and all of those things are changing the landscape of our waters, obviously. And once the corals die, they lose all their beauty, they lose all their pigmentation, and they become shells of their former selves, but they have a defense mechanism, and that's their reproduction, the way they reproduce. And so when this happens, a lot of this, there's a synchronized event for a lot of corals in certain places, and it absolutely blew me away. My jaw was on the floor. I was tearing up, which I do in every single one of these episodes. I get emotional, and it was just beautiful. And I'm not going to go into detail. Check it out. Blue Planet 2 is on Netflix. All of these are on Netflix, by the way, including the next one I'm going to talk about here, which is Cosmos. Cosmos, if you don't already know, came out a few years ago, 5 years ago now, with Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's working on a second one, which is coming out in the spring, apparently. Cosmos is a wonderful journey through space-time, really setting the groundwork for physics, and it goes through the history of physics. I just watched the episode where Michael Faraday discovers electricity, essentially, and it sets up these episodes in such a uniformed fashion where it shows Newton and Faraday as they create their inventions and create their theories, and it really helps you understand in layman's terms what physics is all about. And physics is everything. Physics is everything around us. So it's totally mind-blowing as you're watching it. Neil deGrasse is such a great teacher, such an intelligent man who knows how to put on a good show and entertain. And Cosmos is wonderful. It's kind of a science fiction. It's a lot of CG and a lot of theorizing, but are some beautiful facts there that help you understand the world that we're working our way through a little bit better. Physics are that important, and Cosmos is that important. This is obviously a remake of the old 70s Carl Sagan program called Cosmos, which I haven't seen, and I do need to, because I'm a fan of Carl Sagan's work. Cosmos, it's on Netflix. Check it out. I love this series. So that is it for everything I watched last week. I've been watching quite a bit of anime, anime TV shows and documentaries. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to hit the thumbs up button. And if you're new to the channel and want to receive notifications when I do release a new video, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, as well as the little bell for notifications. And I'd also love to know what you guys have been watching, and or if you've seen any of the films and documentaries and anime that I showed and talked about today. And if you did, feel free to leave those in the comments below. I'd love to get a little discussion going. Anyways, guys, I will see you next time. Bored Cyborg out. Schwa!